Thank you, Mihir. Good morning, everybody. Of course, after this wonderful presentation by Dr. Hurdle, I have few things to say. Okay. I think since morning we're all discussing the need for having common terminology, and that's where we stem from. Like all other eye movement disorders, even the nystagmus classification comes from the CMAs. I won't go through the details. It's all available on the net. We'll save some time. But basically, the three most common and important forms are the infantile nystagmus syndrome, the fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndrome, and the spasmus nutans. All of it is there. I'm just going to skip it. I think it's the same slide all of us are putting up. Um, Again, we'll skip this. This is the features given by the CMAs, the clinical features, and like Dr. Hurdle said, the most important diagnostic criteria are the accelerating slow phases recorded on the eye movement recordings. We'll skip all of this. Um, what really does the patient of nystagmus face in the real world? I think it's way more different than what we see in the clinic. What we see in the clinic is mostly the visual acuity and some other visual functions, but what he faces in the real moving world is way different than what we perceive of it. And these are some of the visual functions which have been studied. The visual acuity, not just a measure of what we take on any of the charts, the Snellens or the HOTV or none of those. There's much more to it than just that. Detection of motion, recognition time of a stimulus, gaze dependent visual acuity, which means how does he see with a particular face position. What is really the size of the functional visual space? What is the size of the space or the object that he can see? And like we just discussed, the motion-induced amblyopia, which Sir just said is different from the ametropic amblyopia, and the complex visual vestibular function. Coming to being more specific, these are the visual functions that can actually be measured: the foveation time, the beat-to-beat foveation position and velocity, the longest foveation domain, the expanded nystagmus acuity function, the null zone position and width, and all of this can be done on eye movement recordings. What is it that we really do in the clinic? We'll just go through it very quickly. Of course, we record vision, irrespective of me saying that probably visual acuity is not a direct correlation with what really the patient is going through. For the younger ones, we use the Teller acuity charts. For the slightly older ones, the recommended is the ATS HOTV tests, and for the older ones, the ATS ETDRS protocols, but depending on what we have in the clinic, we just use the Snellens or the Leah symbols. I think it's important to first note how to record this vision. If there is an abnormal head posture, it's first important to note the head posture and record the vision in that head posture, in keeping that child, allowing that child to maintain that head posture. And of course, protocol would be to record binocular vision, monocular vision, at distance, at near, at different gaze angles. And while you are doing this, if you see an alternate face turn, and another important thing would be to record vision in the adducting eye in a FMNS. For those of us who don't have eye movement recordings, clinically it would be a good clue to record vision in the primary position and at gaze angles 15 and 30 degrees on either sides. So you would get a judgment on which side is the null and what is the vision lateral to the null. Of course, this is how we do it in our clinic. And this is clinically important because if you see that there is reduced vision at gaze angles other than the null, you'd probably be able to tell that therapy will improve his function, visual function. Another thing that we do in the clinic all the time is to record near vision. Again, clinically important because it gives you a clue as to the convergence null. And when you have near visual acuity more than the distance, you can probably think of a convergence null and take your treatment options accordingly. Very important part is how long does it take to recognize a stimulus. Of course, there's no direct measure, it's just as and when you're recording, you kind of get a judgment of how long it takes for that child to read the letters. An important part of the evaluation of a case with nystagmus would obviously be the sensory system and the motor system. A binocular subjective refraction is probably a good thing to do in the clinic. I think we've also discussed this morning the importance of contrast sensitivity and the effect it has on a case of nystagmus. What is the implication of treatment protocols and how it changes? I think sir is doing a study, so we'll wait for his results. Color vision, and we found that the color vision test made easy is probably the easiest test to use in the clinic in young children. Visual field assessment should be incorporated into the initial examination. It is more to understand where the lesion is and also what this visual field compromise is already doing to the already compromised otherwise visual field. Going to the objective testing, visual evoked potentials are an important part of an evaluation of a case with nystagmus, and obviously it gives us more information regarding the functional integrity of the visual system. It helps us understand where the dysfunction is, and it's recommended that the protocol that is followed, the standard protocol that is followed, be slightly altered, and you use the 3-channel system with 1 electrode in the midline and 2 on the lateral. Again, patients who have poor fixation usually only respond to the flash VEP, but in children who have slightly better vision, it is recommended that versus the standard pattern reversal VEP that we follow, the pattern onset offset VEP is giving better results. Coming to the ERG, of course it's an important part of evaluation of a case with nystagmus, and one nice thing that I found is where all your clinical examination otherwise is normal, retina looks normal, and you kind of want to put it as the child just has, clinically at least, just an idiopathic INS. There was one study which showed that in about half of these children you will find something on the ERG. So that was an interesting observation for me. Of course, with the new spectral domain OCTs, it's kind of getting better to image the retina, the macular area in children, which was initially not possible, and I think this has its significance in albinism patients. Of course, fundus photos for documentation. And lastly, when you use eye movement recordings, there are various functions which have been described in the book. The nystagmus foveation function, the nystagmus acuity function, the nystagmus acuity function for position, and the expanded nystagmus acuity function. But from what I understand is the NAFX is probably the most powerful tool in assessing visual function in these patients at this time. That's it. Thank you.